very appreciated.
Yeah, it's 6:30
by me.
now.
So trying.
Bill or Burnell, can you hear us clearly?
This is Burnell. I can.
This is Bill Cole. I'm going to be, I'm logged in now. I'm going to be stepping out for just a little bit. I have something I need to take care of with the kids, and then I'll be back on in a little. Just so you know, if I don't speak up, that's why.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll convene the workshop between the planning board and the town council. We posted this meeting in an effort to hopefully gain some clarity between the two boards as to where we're moving towards with respect to medical marijuana, registered caregiver performance standards and local licensing requirements, and also performance standards and local licensing requirements for as far as the ordinance goes. And there's several versions of where we are right now floating around. We have on June 24th a version of the ordinance that was the ordinance, zoning ordinance review was dated April 13, 2022. The performance standards and licensing requirements was dated November 9, 2021. And to me, it seems as though that at least one of these is not the most recent draft that we had before us, because there was at least one that was dated November 29th, 2021. And I believe that was, what came out of that was a separation of responsibilities. Greg has a list of things that were sent from, I believe, Mallory to Bill Straub.
On December 15th.
Yeah, December 15th, which assigned certain tasks to the planning board, respect to performance standards, and then separating out what would be basically town council business, which would be the licensing administrative type things. That's my understanding of it. Is that basically, you weren't there then, but is that what?
Yeah. Really two separate and distinct parts to what you asked us to look at.
Yeah.
So the zoning piece, you asked us back in December to develop the zoning requirements and ordinance for registered caregivers as a home occupation. That went through, and we had all of our internal debates and everything else that was going on. So I don't know what specifically you're looking at tonight for that. I can attempt to answer questions on that, but my understanding is, well, the planning board did approve what I'll call our version, making them a registered, a major home occupation. There was quite a bit of debate on that, and I believe that ordinance was ultimately approved and sent to you folks. And then as far as the licensing portion goes, we did not even look at that. I guess I would say if you go back and review what we did prior, after the letter was received, by the planning board around January 10th or January 12th of 2022, advising us of the request, and it attached to that document a set of, this is a letter. Yeah, and so attached to that email in January was a set of licensing standards that we were advised to not touch, but to make sure wherever you end on your land use piece, it would then comport with the licensing piece, you know, hours of operation, make sure they match, that kind of stuff. But when I went back to, you know, to take a look, it would appear that there are really two licensing things going on here. So if the board recalls, back in October, November, December, the council had a lot of conversations related to licensing because that came out of the cultivation ordinance, if you recall. And so you had a lot of conversations back in those 3 months, and that resulted in a draft, right? I don't know if you all have that. But then at that last meeting or something in December of 2021, the question came up in that meeting was, if we already have, so we're talking and telling the planning board to go out and develop land use as a major home occupation, and then separately you say, but we also want to license these folks. That's where some of the conversation ensued, because you had at that time the cultivation ordinance, which already had licensing provisions in it. So the conversation kind of went around robin. We've all been there, kind of going back and forth about what we want to do. And then the conversation went to, well, if we have it here, why would we do it over here? Why don't we just pull it out of the cultivation and have a broadly defined marijuana establishment licensing ordinance to that effect? And that ordinance, I believe that licensing ordinance was advanced to the planning board on or about January 10th, 2022. And that email that we have contains the letter, the directive from the town council, which we believe we fulfilled by the zoning piece. And, you know, and it said, well, you don't need to look at the licensing piece. Just make sure at the end that they, whatever you do in the land use, talks to the licensing. So again, hours of operation, that kind of stuff. So after we approved our piece on the zoning, and this was probably April or early May, the directive, but the planning board said at the end of that meeting, and I think it was actually me, and it was the prior planner, who I think still works here, right? Dave, yeah. Was requested, okay, can you go and just modify the licensing piece just to make sure that the two match? And then it went to you folks sometime in June or July, and now we're here. So it would appear that the version that we were given in January of 2022 may not necessarily be the one that you're talking about. And so, and again, I don't know, because in all honesty, as I get drafts and redrafts, I have, you know, we all have stacks of paper, and as you go through it, we forget what one we're working on. So we really need to get for future conversations going back and forth between the boards, we really need to have a footnote put in on the date so that we know what version we're working with. Yeah, because
that's a key piece.
That becomes really a key issue. So
Did David Gilbright send us? I don't ever remember getting any David Gilbright on this.
What I conclude right now, because I found I found the copy of the December 15th Mallory to planning board chair, then Bill Scrub, who got down on January 1st. That's the same memo that Greg has. But what I think that we got on June 24th does not reflect what Greg's reporting out as the most recent draft of either one of those documents. And so we have to find that.
So I have it right here. I'm looking at it right now.
We also have, if you go to the June 28 minutes, the reason we called for this meeting is from the June 28th draft that we went through, and you and I both had questions on. I'm looking at it right now.
I went back and looked at that, and I called him. I said, I think you guys might be looking at the wrong one.
Okay, so if that's the wrong one,
That's what I printed
we
up.
called this meeting for that.
Yeah.
And
So,
so
I guess,
John, have you guys, you and Jeff, did you guys get anything from, I don't ever remember getting marijuana from David Gilmore.
No.
It said these were the final drafts. I remember we sent stuff. I don't remember.
what meeting did you discuss it at?
628 is where.
Does anybody have the 628 backup? Because I don't know what you guys. I obviously I looked, right? But I don't have it printed out. No. Just look right on.
I say, I'm looking at 68. I'm looking at 628 right now.
This is the reporting document.
We've got five, right?
Which is,
And that's what I have right now, April 13th, November 9th. Those are the documents where
This one. Okay, I believe that one is not going to be correct.
Well, the licensing requirements,
So in your November meetings,
and then this one is the other document.
so this is Jeff right here.
this
This one looks.
This is
That's your zoning. Planning board.
this one here. So this one,
so that's the one I had all the questions on. Was that?
what we got?
No, the license.
These two other documents.
That's the home occupation that you asked us.
Yes, okay, good.
Yeah.
Nick,
So
so you're good.
So the home occupation, if you have nothing on that, the preference would be for you to move forward with that at the public hearing and ultimately adopt depending on any items to that. But as far as the licensing piece goes, I got nothing to get here.
Yeah, no, that's,
Yeah.
and that was on us. The licensing is on us.
But I think that's the document Mallory had worked on and sent back to you. There may be this, April 13th. I think you're right on that. This is.
Yeah. So what I think happened is between November and when we got it on January, that's when the town council said, let's lift all the licensing out, because we already have it right here in the cultivation.
Correct.
Let's lift it out and do a marijuana establishment license. And that was a 4-1, and you said no, Jack, and I remember that, and then, so there was that vote. And so between that day and the middle of January, we got a new updated draft. So I'm making the assumption that somewhere in there, the town council had some conversations or someone put together a draft that was then sent to the planning board. And so if you look at that draft, in all honesty, it doesn't look that bad. It's kind of similar to the cultivation piece. It adds definitions and expands it because you're pulling it all together into one. So that's why at the end of the day, when we approved the zoning piece, we're like, oh, the changes should be simple, straightforward.
Can I just ask you if you have a copy of the definitions somewhere that are in place?
Yeah, I do.
Because I don't-
So my recommendation would be,
I don't have any.
I'm happy to go through my email and my documents and try to help recreate this some more, and I'll coordinate with you, Ken.
Yeah.
And then we can go from there. So I mean, and then we can kind of confirm what the final.
So I think you're good. Our confusion or the confusion of that night was the licensing.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's the thing. The document we're working off right now, the one on November 9th.
I believe that's the wrong one. I believe that's the wrong one.
That's the wrong one. I believe that's the
So there's two on here, there's two on the email, the second, that's like a page and a half, right? Or is it?
They're like 3 pages.
Okay, that's the one that we were talking about on June 28th.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. That,
And I have my own set of problems with that, and so I would not,
I
even
made
though
notes.
I wouldn't let you get by, I have my own issues.
So I made notes on that night right here, because that was the one we were discussing.
Yeah, ACCK, we had them all.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
And I think what happened between your December meeting and the January meeting, someone compiled the new licensing and probably used the language that you had already approved in the cultivation. You added some stuff.
Mallory did, she cut, pasted it over, and used, it was, Mallory did that.
Yeah, no, that, I don't know who did it. I don't care. I'm
No,
just
no, no,
saying.
no, but she has, that's why I said, Mallory, it's an item,
Yeah,
it's gonna be hard, she has that name.
yeah.
She was doing the licensing. She was working with it.
So at the end of the day, on that licensing piece, I know when I looked at it real quick, it was like, oh, it's pretty straightforward, very similar to the cultivation, shouldn't be a big deal, you know? So if you're happy with the cultivation,
Yeah.
you know, then, because, yeah, so it really should clarify. So I'm happy to go through, even though the planning board hasn't looked at it, and just kind of help recreate that, and help you. I don't want to get in the way.
We gotta have
So,
something. I think Mallory has. Mallory probably has some. Yeah, Mallory.
That's where we're at right now with the licensing. If we're good with, and I think we are, I think we're good with the planning board and the ordinance part of it. It's the licensing part where all my questions were.
yeah,
None of it was with the ordinance.
yeah, the licensing is really your piece.
Yes.
So, yeah,
And after June 28th meeting, there was no discussion about the zoning ordinance thing, it was pretty much an odd.
Yeah.
People were okay with that. The meeting was called to talk about the licensing.
Yeah. So the only thing I would throw on your agenda now is we do have another application that was submitted for out in the I-1 area. And that individual is taking the approach of hemp. And so it's a very interesting issue to look at. And hemp is a very, very difficult drug to monitor because if you let it go too long, the THC grows, or, you know, and it becomes marijuana. So, oops, I harvested too late. And so all I would say is if while the planning board is done with it, please don't send it back. We had enough of our own internal battles. And so we're done, we're happy. And so it's yours. If you're so inclined, and I would be happy to come out private, not as a planning board member, to say you may want to just expand that and say and because what's theoretically being proposed is really not the intent of what was the cultivation piece. So it's kind of a loophole, right? We all love that word. So it may be something you want to think about. And so again, it would really just be a slash. So too late now. It's too late now. But moving forward.
We probably did. So a quick note for the council. I invited Jane and you get tonight. Not only because we called the thing, but because they have extensive, they spend extensive amount of time working on this stuff. So they have some background and some wanna technology, they all know like all this stuff. So I asked them to sit in on the meeting and if they have any input, they could help us.
And a great donut shop. Fantastic donut shop. Yes.
Well,
So feel free to ask some questions.
So are we just talking about licensing? I just want to make it clear what we're talking about before we kind of go off.
we're actually talking about both.
Great.
And,
That's great.
but based on, we were all copied on, anyway, the charge from the town council chair to the planning board chair on December 15th is clear. Trust the planning board to address any way they see fit, hours of operation, square footage restrictions, odor mitigation, traffic control considerations like appointment only and or no drive-through, lighting, signage, any necessary new definitions, any necessary amendments. So I believe, that's clear. to the extent that the planning board has done that with the, I believe, the April 13th draft we have, you should check that out.
I think that one's right. I think we're okay on that.
Yeah, it was sometime in April. I missed one of the meetings in April, the second one, so, but I'm pretty sure it was wrapped up.
I think the issue here is the license.
Yeah, and I went through these, at least the April 13th, which was from our second meeting in June. That was part of the supporting documents. And I didn't mark that up at all. I went through November 9th, and I had lots of markups. So I'm saying that November 9th is not the most recent. So we have to dig out the most recent draft of the performance standards and local licensing requirements. Find out where that is. And then at that point, we can review it and then start understanding.
Oh, good. So curve it until then, realistically.
Yeah.
Until we can get it. No use talking about it. We haven't seen it. Unless we go on the one from July 20. I just said 28.
Well, no, because that's old. That's November 9th. And I have at least one other version from November 29th right here. And we have.
And then I got one from January. So I just sent the January submittal to the planning board. I just sent it to Tim.
So I'll go upstairs and print that. No, which one? I mean, we can, but rather than get wrapped around the wheel, we can talk about it, or we can.
Yeah,
I believe when you, it'll be a waste of time tonight to have a look at it. I think if you send it and they look at it, I think they'll look at that and say, oh, a lot of your questions will probably be answered, other than if you're okay with the zoning piece, you may have to go back and change the hours of operation or the signage or whatever else you want.
Because that's all vacant.
That's all, yeah. There's
Parking,
nothing there.
parking,
And but we answered
signage.
all of that, so.
No,
Yeah, so if you agree and you adopt that
We'll
zoning,
involve that to you guys.
if you get that zoning piece and you agree with it, that will automatically change everything under the
When you guys
license.
wrote these ordinances, did you go by the OCP rules, or did you go and meet state statute, or did you go kind of off something else? Like, can you just help me understand that?
It's all based on both the statute and the then Office of Animal Policy.
So we,
But now, that's another question, bring up a good point. Do we have to go back in the state's wisdom and change our previously adopted ordinances that refer to medical marijuana, which is now medical cannabis?
I think so, and I also think that,
And she's interrupting, but there's another piece to this, because I'm kind of on the warpath of the state, about all the stuff they give us to do.
yeah,
Now, are our citations wrong because there's a more recent citation based on whatever enabling legislation or regulation promulgated from a law that changed the name?
yeah, you need to put
Cannabis.
in the all encompassing language that may be changed or amended as from time to time, that they need to have.
so I don't wanna put more work on any table, so.
No, that's a
It's
piece,
kinda,
because we want to be accurate.
we would have to see the final of what's going on right now, because going through this, I've just found 6 different things that contradict itself and isn't correct in here.
What are
So
you
we can
looking
fix
at?
it. I'm looking at,
Just a day.
April 13th, and where's the other piece of paper?
Is it the zoning or the licensing?
This is only April 13th, so.
One is zoning. I guess it's all zoning. It's all on this. When you specifically call out 2 or more caregivers, it's co-op for 1. For 2, your,
Could you repeat that again, speak more slowly?
sure. When you call out 2 caregivers on the same premises, it's called co-op. State calls it out as a co-op.
Not necessarily. That's if they are an unregistered caregiver. There's multiple levels of caregivers when reviewing the statutes. We've been over this 100 times, and you got to go back and talk with Phil Sossi around that. That would be my recommendation. Because you can't prohibit co-ops. Is that what you're going after?
No. So two people
Yeah.
on the same premises working with a license and a medical card, caregiver card, is considered co-op through the OCP. major home off. Do you have this piece of paper? Do you have these? I don't know what this is from or where I even got this. Do you have this?
Is it dated?
I don't think so.
This is something that we've been struggling with for a long time, that we get information that is not dated,
Yeah,
or with the latest revision date on it.
it might be part.
And also page numbers.
You sent this to.
That's licensing. That's the licensing part right
That's
there.
okay, but so here, so if it's licensing and this is in that document, I don't know where we got these. But you see. If you're gonna call out major home occupations in these documents, but you send it to Tim, he forwarded it to us, so you have that somewhere. But the standard's not correct. So if you see B standard here and B standard here, they're not even the same.
So this, if that's what I forwarded, this is the this one first. This thing unchanged solicitation, but this is beyond.
You can't call this a home occupation though, and have a different standard than a home occupation in the other ordinance they have. You can call it something different. You can't call it the same thing. See how it's different?
So it's different than 140-1.
Which is the home. And I know because I just rewrote the minor, so I know it's like.
Okay. Yeah.
So there was conversation about.
This is being changed currently.
There,
That's minor. That's different. That has nothing to do with marijuana.
right, the major home occupations already classified as major home occupation.
Right, but if you classify a major home occupation, it has to follow the same guidelines. So if you look,
Follow the same guidelines, what, minor?
No, it has to be a major site.
so if you look at B
Yes,
and you go down to 1B,
yeah,
it says there shall be no outdoor storage of materials or products associated with business on the premises.
Yeah.
If you go to your actual B, like standard, and you go down to 3, it says
what the one we currently have now.
exterior storage of materials. You have to follow it. If you're gonna call it a major home occupation in this town, not everything's gonna fall under marijuana. So if you're gonna have a different standard for marijuana, you need to call it out in definition and the
So
standard.
we did have that debate.
They're two very different things.
Yeah, so
They different things.
we had called it up. I guess I'm not really following.
Let me end that section.
Sure, go ahead.
We can't have two
It
definitions.
was referencing
Read this.
a medical marijuana major home occupation.
Yes,
And when you use the term major home occupation,
yeah,
that takes you automatically back to like 140-3 that's already defined. So we simply have to follow something else.
there was a debate on the planning board about specifically calling it medical marijuana home occupation, as opposed to defining it underneath the home
That's
occupation.
what I'm saying.
That was the original request, and that did not make it. Again, so,
That's okay.
yeah, that should be, I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But do you see how like
I do
somebody
see
who
what,
hasn't seen
yeah.
anything else read that, I'm like, well, hold on. a
It
second.
should be separately called out as a separate home occupation, so it doesn't get intermixed with a home occupation minor.
Well, you can't say, hey, you have a home occupation and it's medical marijuana.
Yep.
You can't store anything outside,
Right,
but you have a major home occupation and you
yeah.
sell donuts and you have it outside.
and in every other
You know.
ordinance, the majority of the other ordinances that you look at, it is separately identified as medical marijuana home occupation.
Perfect.
Yeah, that I would absolutely agree with you on that.
Okay, perfect.
So if that's the change, that's at this point, I'd say the council deal with that.
Yeah.
That's an easy thing to do.
Yeah,
It's like, his email not coming through, so it's probably off the internet, and somebody land here in my office, anyway, so. Yeah, I can't believe it.
This is very good because we're at least landing in the same airport.
Get this done.
We're not on the same runway yet, but
I think we're looking for it.
but this is good. This is very
Taxi
good.
around.
Yeah, because, you know, but,
So if you don't have any issues on the zoning, it is correct, absolutely agree with you 100%. There should be medical marijuana, home occupation as a separate, and that's what it is in every other ordinance.
I would even say stay away from the home occupation part of things, because just in case a disinterested third party came in, who might have Esquire behind their name, would say, so Brewer, you call this one thing, you know, what is it? It's an ambiguity. Then it's an ambiguity, they assume in their own favor, they didn't write it.
Yeah.
So I think we should stay away and call it a use.
You know, there should be its own separate use, and its own separate.
Whatever way we call it out, stay away from that whole lot.
So I don't know, like, how far you guys are to finalizing.
We're not even close.
Okay, so if you have a copy of it, I'd like to see it. There's like specific things that need to be like called out in it.
Copy of,
Like in the actual up-to-date ordinance, I don't have that here. I think I have the old stuff.
well,
I'd have to go back. And look at it.
Is that this?
You know, one of the things,
I think that is.
one of the things that, again, needs to be worked on both sides of the communication, because I did ask if a formal letter had been drafted up, transmitting it back, because really kind of without that, it's what version are we looking at? So I have to go back and look at the planning board meeting, but the April 13th does come to mind.
Okay,
As,
That's this
yeah,
one?
as that should be the final one.
this is
Yeah.
the latest one.
That's the one the board was, that's.
Yeah.
So at the June 28th meeting, we said this was fine, and when we talked about the licensing fees, that's where all the questions are. But they want to put both of them together.
Yeah.
So I think this one's, the piece we're done with saying it's okay.
So this, I believe it's okay. So all you're doing now, is what Jenny's saying, is just reclassify it as its own separate category. Don't classify it under major home occupation, correct?
Right.
Yeah, create its own, which I think that is
Can't
actually.
have, so,
Yeah.
can I just explain it from
Yeah,
here?
go for it.
So you can't have, like, so I have two different documents here. One of them says, and this is a great example, under standard 1, it says there shall be no outdoor storage of materials or products associated with business on the premises. On this document I have, it's dated like 12/1 something, I don't know, it's different. But anyways, it calls out the actual ordinance as it stands today in South Berwick. And it's standard 3, and it's under major home occ, and it says exterior storage of materials and any other exterior evidence of the home occupation shall be so located or screened so as not to distract from the residential character of the principal building or neighborhood. So in this home occ, without any kind of verbiage in front of it, it's two very different standards. They're not the same. They have to be the same if you're going to call them the same thing, and the standards don't match.
I'm
either.
suggesting, following your lead, that we don't call them the same thing.
Right.
To eliminate the confusion.
Yes.
And then we just simply call, it's gonna be medical marijuana site, or whatever noun we use, but it'll be different just to eliminate the ambiguity.
And also,
I think you already have the term, medical marijuana registered caregiver, home occupation. You just, that's what it is, a separate, you pull it out of home occupation.
Jack, if you don't mind, can I take a look at this and just jot down some things? Because like the odor mitigation doesn't call out a certain number of days that they have to fix it after code enforcement.
You don't
uses
April
them.
13th now?
Yeah, but I still his.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
You can have this if you want.
This is the first, well, this is the first I've ever seen
But
this one.
I would suggest that, you know, because my stack has old stuff in it and superseded.
Okay.
So I would say for at least zoning ordinance review and amendments, that we start with this.
Okay.
And then use that as a rough draft,
Sure.
and then offer edits and suggested changes. As we build on this.
Can I do that for you? Can I make some changes
We'd
on
love
here
that.
and submit it to you guys?
That's
Or-
fine. That would be great.
Okay,
And something else to also think about regarding the medical marijuana caregiver home occupation is the amount of security that person is going to have on their property protecting their home occupation is significantly higher than somebody that makes going to.
No, this doesn't call out a security plan, so we'll fix this.
That's
So the licensing.
That's where the licensing piece comes in.
Yeah.
So where I have the problem.
So I can't enforce licensing like that, the town can, I can enforce zoning.
Correct.
So if we can call it out in bold, I can enforce that.
right. You can use the same wording in the licensing piece and also address it on the zoning side for strictly that. enforcement.
I'm just gonna take this and I'm gonna mark it up and resubmit it to you guys, is that okay? That's great.
We'll actually have one that we can work off of and we know where it came from.
You know, means they put the date at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will.
All over it.
When are you guys talking about this again?
It's a recurring item on
Okay.
our agenda,
Okay,
but we've been waiting to get a meeting like this together so that we can create a plan to move ahead and, you know, just sort it out, because it's, you know, as we all know right now, it's confusing. And so we want to know what draft we're working from, and the other thing, whether it's Tammy or Jennifer, whatever, you know, do your best to find that January 2022
that's
draft.
the one that's missing, that's the one I don't have.
Yeah, because
I should
January,
have that on my email tomorrow.
okay,
I went through this again today, and I see things that should have gone.
So what we need to agree to is Jenny hands us this piece of paper. We're done going backwards. We don't look at any other papers that we looked at 5 months ago, 5 years ago, because we've been doing this almost as long as I've been sitting. So when we get the one from her, time now, everything else goes in the wastebasket.
That'll only give us the zoning ordinance review, but now we have to do a little bit more homework to find out which iteration of the performance standards and licensing requirements.
Correct.
That's the January piece.
yeah, I don't have that,
She gets
We
that.
don't have that yet.
okay.
So we have, it exists.
Yeah, I just sent it again to
Who
the,
has the PDF of this?
The PDF is
I mean,
what is that?
Is this?
Amy probably.
Amy does?
I would say-
April 13th?
Yeah.
That's in the supporting documents for our meeting, or second meeting.
but you want the Word version so you can change it and alter and
So
change.
We have that.
Well, I want the Word document too, but who owns this document?
It's ours. It's ours.
It is the Amy's or ours. It's either on Amy's computer or.
So if you, okay, let me do some work on this week and let me get this over to you. At the beginning of next week. And you can start, maybe we can start from there.
What's our agenda look like next week, Tim?
I'm gonna be there anyway, so.
Not terribly heavy.
All I'm saying is we need 2 weeks. Take.
Why don't we just be safe? Can we push it out 2 weeks? I don't know. We're just now making the agenda for next Tuesday, so. I'm sure it's that following meeting.
Push it out to the following meeting.
So let's
Give her
get
time to
3
review
weeks.
it. Gives us time to review it.
Yeah, we don't need to rush. Let's go out to the next meeting and I'll make sure we get it by the
So is that the 23rd or the 30th?
23rd.
The 23rd? Okay,
So let's have it, let's plan on, it's okay with the council.
yes.
The 23rd, I'll put it back in front of you by then you'll have the documents to read, whatever she's got to do before I give it back.
Yeah. And I have everyone's email address, I think. right?
Couple quick questions. Can you brought up in the meeting about the licensing fees. They may have information that can help with that one way or the other. So on the licensing fees, I just want to talk about that for 1 second. You had talked about no license shall be granted. I made a note on this for you. No license shall be granted, shall be that license from the authority of the police chief, fire chief, how about the code enforcement officer, only positive recommendations I have to comply, right?
Yep.
Okay, can you, so I had a meeting, yes, I had a meeting with them about that, because that was my question. They gave me feedback, I'll ask them to give you that same feedback.
Okay, but it's all good, Tim. Like you said, I gave you my heartaches of, I don't understand, and I have a problem handcuffing any business that's legal in the state of Maine. That we don't do to everybody in town.
Perfect,
That's my problem.
thank you. Can you explain, will you explain to me in the meeting, I had an employee meeting with them, to bring this up to them.
Do you want me to do it? Okay. So under administration, I don't know if you have the November 9th draft, but you're gonna see, again, review procedures under the standards A. So right now, it calls out the town clerk shall be responsible for the initial investigation of the application.
Yep.
Cross out town clerk, it's actually town planner shall do that. And then under, so that the rest of that's fine. And then B, the licensing authority shall have the authority to impose any conditions of license or reasonable necessary. We were confused on that. We were trying to figure out if that was the select board or the planning board, right? So who is the licensing authority? I have that.
That'll be the town council.
Town council. So that's good. So that should say the town council. Should call you guys out specifically. And then under C, it says no license shall be granted by the licensing authority until police chief, fire chief, cross out health officer, and then and code enforcement officer all made positive recommendations regarding the applicant's ability to comply with any ordinance or whatever. And then it says, it goes on to say, the next line, the town clerk, cross it out, town planner. And then again, it calls it out 1, 2, 3 lines down, the town clerk again.
All
cross it
those
out,
town clerk,
planner.
all those town clerk references should
Town
be
planner.
gone.
Yep.
No, should be code enforcement officer is the person who is going to be reviewing.
Town planner.
Well, the town planner,
Town planner for us.
Yeah.
You heard on that.
So it says the town planner shall, so it was the clerk, but now it should read, the town planner shall provide a copy of the license application to each official along with a form upon which the official shall note their findings and conclusions. That's planner, as well as any recommended conditions of approval. And then it goes on to read, the town planner automatically include any conditions of approval recommended by the officials on an issue for which the town clerk is the licensing authority. But again, she's not the licensing authority, it's the council.
It goes on further.
So John,
So which part on the back?
Oh, no, there's other references to, if you go on to F, there's references to the town clerk. Application.
Yeah, that all needs to be cleaned up. All
Yeah,
the town
so
clerks just need these out.
We kind of stopped there in the meeting and he kind of said, hey, come to the workshop at that point.
Yeah, and just when you're looking at, I'm just doing, while you were doing that, I'm looking at the January one, completely different.
It goes on along.
Okay.
so I think but anyway,
And that's
John talked about what he said, you know, this is different for home occupation. We don't do this for every other home occupation. So we will address the police chief, fire chief, code enforcement officer, making recommendations as far as licensing for, you would have that conversation with us and we could.
We had a conversation about it. Yeah, so you wanted to explain to you why the fire chief needs to know? Okay, so do you want to take this or do you want me to? Are you sure?
I'm positive my voice doesn't carry as well.
That's nice. Okay, so, and true. All right, so,
Remember,
Okay.
if you're gonna require a security system, police is gonna see it. If there's more of a fire load because of growing or doing something, fire is gonna see that.
I
The
can,
fire department's gonna know there's gonna be a greater danger on the scene when they get there. It's not just a residential home.
So if I had a body shop, does it qualify? Will I have the fire chief sign off?
you should.
That's not what I'm asking.
Yep.
It should. Is it in our ordinance that I have to work on occupation?
It's going to be. We're rewriting that ordinance right now. That's
So-
gonna come out before this.
Then I'm good with it.
Yeah.
If they're all the same,
Yeah.
I have no issue, but right now I know they're not.
So let me tell you what
I
should
don't
happen.
think it's fair.
I'm gonna tell you what should happen, but, you know, South Berwick a long time had a fire chief, it was the same person as their code enforcement officer. So it was no brainer, he knew what the buildings looked like, he was the one COing them. I'm not a firefighter, I don't go into the building. Okay, so let's play this scenario. All right, so Mr. Minahan, is that how you say it? He owns a medical cultivation facility. Okay, he's grown marijuana. He has 6 or 7 different employees in his building. And if you've ever been into a building where they grow, it's several different rooms. It's not one big room. There's like 5 or 6 different areas. You know, there's different stages, different whatever. So usually there's some sort of watering system. They have one that has all lights in it, you know, and we hope they never catch, you know, fire, but sometimes they do. So when your fire chief and your guys that are here to fight this fire in the building go up to a place like this, or any place, a body shop, a paint spraying, whatever, you can call it whatever you want, okay? His building catches fire, we show up on site, we're firefighters, okay? We walk up to the building, Doug's not there. He's in California doing business or wherever, okay? We don't know what's in that building. Just like we don't know what's in an auto shop building either. So what needs to happen, and this town doesn't do it, but I will tell you, your new fire chief, very interested in doing it. What they need is they need a blank copy of every commercial business or any business that they're going to show up to, okay? And that's the same like him going on COs of a house. He's not going to do that. We have the plans, houses are houses, right? Bedrooms, kitchen, living room, think about that. All these buildings look different. The reason why we require, or we should require, we don't here, sorry, wrong town. The reason why we should require that is so that the firefighters know exactly where those lights are in that building. They know exactly where the watering room is in that building. They know exactly where in your body shop you have your spray, you have your paint booth. They need to know all those things.
All good, agreed.
Yep.
100%.
And with the security system, let's talk about Route 4. Okay, there's a business on Route 4 that the security system goes off a lot there. Sometimes there's actually people there and sometimes there isn't. So this bell rings, right? And they go and whatever, they have no idea how to get inside. There's Knox boxes in other towns. We don't have that ordinance here, okay? But they need to know exactly what that security system is, what the security alarm system is, like who to call, what to do. They need to know those things. And that's why the letters from the town employees, the fire chief, the police chief, code enforcement officer, whoever, okay? The code enforcement officer writes a letter and says no violations on the property. They've done all their permitting, we're good, all right? You want that anyway, you want that enforcement, that's why you do it. It's for public safety, it's for the safety of your life, safety.
Which is great, but we're gonna do it.
You should do it
across the board.
You should.
Right? We lost a submarine at the shipyard because there wasn't a firefighter that ever been on a submarine. Ever. Surrounding towns. None of those guys had ever set foot on a submarine. So now maybe why? Every town around here goes down to submarines and goes on so they understand what it is when they win.
We can't have every single firefighter and every single police officer in a town going to the building. So that's where the blank, where the blank thing comes in. So you have a building, you have a shell, it's a drawing. The applicant submits the drawing to them, they write a letter saying, hey, I received the drawing, nothing looks weird, they meet all egress requirements for these buildings, they need to, separate ends of the building. There's all kinds of little checklist things that they need to go through. You know, Chief Hamill now needs to be able to go through and say, check, 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 I'm good with it, I'm writing a letter. Or say, hey, that body shop you own, that sprayer booth, it's not ready. It doesn't have proper ventilation system, doesn't have two forms of egress, all that. They can write that in the letter so that when they come in front of Greg at the planning board,
right, he
can say, our fire chief has life safety concerns.
Right, I'm good as long as, again, my whole thing is, since we started this, we've been singling out
Fair across the board, I get
legal
it.
business, and that was my only gripe. If we're doing it to everybody, they'll never hear me complain again.
What's one thing
About
I
that?
agree with?
Yeah, John, so the issue became more prevalent, and Jen hit on it earlier. So for years, Joe was fired to so we didn't have to worry about it. Joe, when Joe signed on here, he knew he was going to the building. And now with Joe gone, that's kind of the absence. I'm talking to Chief Hamill. Chief Hamill said he felt strongly that we should consider this.
I still consider that I had from day one a conflict of interest. That's just me. how you can be the guy that can write the hit clear at the same time. I've always struggled with. You know what? We'll just go somewhere else on that. How you can have your fire chief and your code enforcement officer be the same guy? I've always struggled with that. That's just
Nobody does it.
like I said, I struggle with it.
So, but now,
That's
because-
where it's moved forward though, so.
Yes, we have.
so
Yeah.
because Jenny's code enforcement and expired.
Yeah.
It would work better if we changed, and she's right. And so what I wanted to get to tonight, we're not changing, you don't want to single one out, we're not. We gotta go back and change ordinance to do it all for everybody.
I'm working on it.
Fantastic. That's all I asked that night, was I didn't understand why I'm doing this to them and not the Wilkie Pie Shop.
Does that make,
Wilkie Pie.
does that make,
Where is that?
Right up on Hooper Sands on the Fair Marsh. I'll give you directions. Fantastic. Weekends only drive through with them.
Drive-through.
Mint.
Is it
Sorry.
a home office? They can't have a drive-through. What's going on right now?
She has specialty flavors every weekend.
she is finding out more stuff about this town. It's like, whoa.
Who just asked?
Yeah.
So you're talking about making some technical edits and a couple substantive to zoning fees for medical marijuana registered caregiver home occupation. And security issues and all that kind of stuff. Okay.
We're just trying to put it in place so everybody's safe. Yeah.
Which I understand. I understand the security piece. I got that. It's cat business. I understand it fully.
And have you ever come across in your travels any of the extraction type of stuff?
Yes.
And because there's a lot of issues with the extraction and the compounds, chemicals that they use. And I guess that's what I'm going to say is that perhaps in the future meeting, you can help them I don't mean this disrespectfully, but help them understand why I bring up the hemp. While it's a little bit late on one, you're still talking chemical extract, potentially.
That's another good reason for the letter to the firefighter. So we had, probably like a year or so ago, I don't even think it's been a year now. We actually had somebody's license pulled in Berwick because they were doing an illegal propane extraction out behind the building. So when we show up on site, you can tell because usually they have the propane tank and it's not always hooked up, but there should be no propane inside. So yes, but that's something else. So if it's extraction, it does need to come in front of the board. It needs to be blessed by the planning board, but it also has to be like blessed by the fire chief and the police department. And the fire chief needs to make sure that they have enough manpower. And where you guys have a volunteer, correct me if I'm wrong, a volunteer firefighter department in town, right? You guys don't have volunteers.
We have paid call for
Paid on
You do?
call, paid on call.
So,
They're part-time paid on call. Yes, it's what you're calling volunteer, but they're paid to go to call.
okay, so they're paid on call, but they're not,
No, they're not sanctioned permits.
that can be very dangerous in your town.
What?
Dangerous in your town to allow that kind of
Like, we shutting
extraction.
down the hazmat team.
They extract.
Well, let's explore that. It's been a little while since I've looked at the law and the rules. But by the prevailing law and the rules, what is permitted for a registered marijuana caregiver? They can grow, they can sell, and they manufacture. And they
can extract.
As long as,
that's manufacturing. Then it's testing. So are they allowed to do those four things?
so they can cultivate,
Oh,
they can harvest, they
That's the
can,
same thing.
they can sell,
Yeah.
yeah, and they can manufacture into like edibles and those sorts of things under most business licenses. But we have to know about those things because the process of them can be different. We need to know.
We have yet to hear of a complaint. I mean, we know anecdotally that we have approximately 35 registered caregivers. Like the woman, that was the last, that's like old data, like a year old, right?
Yeah, year plus.
Yeah. And so what they're allowed to do under the rules and under the law might help guide us in terms of what we craft for revised performance statements.
Yeah, I also want to be you probably already know this, but caregivers, anybody that holds a caregiver card in the state, whether it doesn't matter what town they're in, they're super protected by privacy.
Got it.
So you can call out the addresses that these places are at, if they're commercial retail or whatnot, but you can't call out addresses of privately owned cultivation. So if you had a cultivation on your site in an outbuilding or whatnot, you can't, that's private, they're protected. I don't know if you knew that.
But there are provisions under home rule that we can license.
We can ask
So
them
we have to
to get
protect
a
Yep.
license. If they don't, until they get caught, they're free.
This is just another way of balancing. Now, and as John has pointed out, you know, we want to be fair, respect to other land uses and all the rest. And the other thing that occurs to me is the years have gone by that we've worked on this, starting with the medical marijuana retail stores, working our way through cultivation. Is that it's kind of creeping into my brain a little bit. Do we actually have a solution already that's looking for a problem? And notwithstanding all the work that's been done to create revisions and all the rest, but it's what we're trying to regulate problematic. I think it's a good, with new staff, it's good to maybe take that step back and look at it through that lens to say, what are the appropriate measures? If the medical registered marijuana caregivers are doing okay. Do we need to land
So on that note, Jack, and I'm going to defer to the table because they have a lot more experience than we have in this area because of what they've been through. But have we had, short of one place that was debating existence for a long time, we had one complaint.
That's what I'm saying.
Anybody else? The entire time we've been doing this, other than 161.
But then there's the other part, when we started out down the road with investigating and putting retail stores in the B1 zone, we had people who were complaining, say, I need my medicine from Bedford, because that was the only place around here that was a dispensary.
Yep.
And now there's going to be a half a dozen on 236 in Elliott, probably another half a dozen at Kittery, and then there's at least, I don't know how many borough.
One dispensary, one retail, one cultivation, all in one facility, get another one opening up.
On
Just
the
up
floor.
over. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
There's another
we
one.
haven't, so we haven't had one problem with the store we put down yet. We haven't had one problem. Marijuana use hasn't run rampant. There haven't been people smoking walking down the street any more than they were smoking walking down the street before it was legal.
Yeah.
We haven't had any problems in town since we did this. So
Both Terry and Elliott have these types of licensing requirements, so we wouldn't be the only place around. And I don't think this is overly burdensome of a business to have to be licensed in town. I would think we would want this in place so that if something happens, whoever has that grievance, I believe somebody has something to call. You know what I mean? Like we're just protecting the future.
I think you
We're not
answered,
going out
I think
there.
you answered your own question there. Right now, there's absolutely zero protections for really the residential areas. And so the issue is if something were to happen, it's kind of like, yeah, have a nice day, not much we can really do about it, other than checking are you properly licensed through the state. And so for that one person or the one house or the multiple households that may have a complaint, you know, now there's something on the books that can require them and bring them under compliance. And so, but you've answered your question by saying, if they're gonna, I'm not saying, I'm not condoning it, but if they're getting away with it, they're doing right, something that they're doing right, perhaps. They're keeping a small scale for whatever they're doing, so it's not raise, you know, the eyes on them. So, but If they get caught, they get caught, now they have to get licensed.
And that's it, and that's where we came into this, we have a license. I go back to when they didn't require like inspection stickers on motorcycle license plates, right? I never had a motorcycle inspector, because it didn't have to be there, nobody ever checked. We won't know unless they do something wrong. Maybe people will come forward and sign up to have a license, maybe they will.
I can tell you, I can tell you a couple things about caregivers with marijuana, cannabis. I can tell you that most of these retailers are great about complying. We have minimal problems with them coming forward. I can tell you that I can call any single one of our businesses across the border over here. And I have compliance the next day. So I also want to tell you that it was brought to my attention on Monday when I was here. Is it okay if I share? Is doing business as, okay.
As a hypothetical. As a hypothetical.
It's not meaning. Yeah. It's just it's a report thing. So you do have some caregivers that come into the town clerk's office. They fill out a form, doing business as, and they say delivery service, medical marijuana delivery service, or whatever. They pay the $10 and walk out the door. Well, where are they delivering to? Where are they filming with it? And what do they have? You know, so this particular one, I don't even know the name, but I can tell you it's too close to a school for the address, and you have an ordinance about it, you know. So I do think that you're going to have a lot more people comply than you think.
That's good.
And I also think that it's good to get people in here for us to know what's going on, and again, for those life safety people to understand.
Again, 100% agree.
Yeah.
Human nature.
I understand.
If they're flying under the radar, why do I want to stick my hand? I know a bunch of caregivers in town. Half of them will probably come sign up for the license and do it.
Yep.
The other half might not. It's just that.
It's hard to write an ordinance when you're already in the thick of it. It's really tough.
That's nice with you guys coming in. Fresh look on what we've been struggling with, and I've been back and forth with for years.
Yeah.
The fresh look is nice. A lot.
It will help. And you can't make everyone comply. But you can keep.
We get 75%, it's really good.
We can try. Yep.
Okay, so I think we have a path forward. Look forward to your suggested edits on April 13th memo on zoning ordinance review, and also see what kind of data mining we can do to find the latest version of the performance standards.
Yeah.
And licensing. That's still kind of a little bit of a black hole for us.
It's got to be out there somewhere.
Find out where, maybe Gilbert, must be good to check.
We'll start looking for it.
And because we know, at least on my file, the last version that I have is November 29th. The last one. And that's the last edit. In fact, and so let's keep moving ahead with that, sort out the language pieces and move ahead.
You're gonna have to change the name to it though, Greg.
What?
You're gonna have to change the name of it, because you were talking about doing medical marijuana registered there or not. It's gonna have to be medical cannabis.
I don't care. The council, it's at the council, yeah. It's the council.
Is that a change from the state?
That's the state
Yeah,
change.
they made it.
Yep.
You can make it easier on yourselves. If the town comes and adopts one simple statement that says, as the state changes the name, it automatically changes in the town. Just like for the code requirements, the energy requirements, the life safety requirements, that one statement can help you save a lot of work. Right?
Thank you guys.
And you don't do that. You have to, I guess, you guys have seen probably or
It's going to be a suggestion.
Yes.
so when it
Yeah.
comes to
If we can save ourselves a lot of time and energy going forward. adopts, the state adopts, you'll see a lot of times.
What that does, Jeff, is you can get the notification, which you don't have in my view, you don't have to go through the approval process again. Because we've already adopted that language, you can say, hey, this is being updated, you know, hey, looks like a plan. It makes it easier and everyone is done.
Smart.
Yeah.
Smart.
It gives the staff that know what the heck is going on. Right. Right. Yeah.
Any other business to discuss?
Just remember that hint as you move forward, you know.
Got it.
And again, it's too late on what's happening down the road, but moving forward, hemp, particularly hemp is used for the CBD. Yeah, that's extraction. So, yeah, from an enforcement perspective, I give really no stuff. So, that's not from the planning board, but that's just so you know something came up.
There's gonna be something in that though from the state, the OCP regulations, because we can't regulate plants or plant numbers. We don't do that. We can regulate addresses, buildings, things like that. So if they carry a hemp license, I believe that the state governs that. But
That's that agricultural.
That's correct.
It's a separate one.
Yes.
Yeah, but you may want to just look at that because the two will become in one. Yeah, they really always happen.
For sure happen.
Okay, thank you all very much. I think it's very productive. Yes, kind of on the track.
Next door neighbor.
So Nancy's your next door neighbor?
Yes.
Should we like